Hey, hello, and howdy. Welcome to the Thrill with Will. We're going to dive into a fun topic, and this is in pursuit of all-around excellence, which is what you know we dive into and pursue at Craftsman Real Estate Services. And we're going to talk about this today. Mind the hole. And specifically what I want to talk about is how holes in our business plans and our business value propositions can really tank us. And I'm actually going to pull from a specific example of a company here locally that gets just a tremendous amount of rave reviews. I'm not going to name names, but if you poke around on BiggerPockets very much, you can figure out who they are. But here's the value proposition that sounds so good, and we're gonna kind of push down to the bottom and find the holes. All right, value proposition. So you're an out-of-state or out-of-area investor, and you are looking at Oklahoma City, and you're saying, "Man, I live in a Los Angeles, a San Francisco, New York City, a Boston. Like I live in a high-value market, and I try to buy real estate properties in my area, but it just doesn't work out. The numbers are too high, the rents are not commensurate. So let's go to a market like Tulsa, Wichita, Oklahoma City, Little Rock, Arkansas, Cincinnati, Ohio. The list goes on and on and on. And so you find this investment company that what they do is they bring off-market properties that are filled with a tenant and made ready and vetted with the tenant in place for you, and they hand it off to you. They can manage some properties. They have some companies they refer to, but it is an end-to-end solution, and they're off market. So you're always going to get something that hasn't been inflated by the market yet, and they have worked directly with the seller to carry out some repairs and to position it well so that you can have a low maintenance investment. How are they valued? How are the properties priced? Well, based on the rents. That's fair enough. We look at properties and we want the 1% rule or whatever your particular rule of thumb is. And so you look at them and you say, okay, well, this house rents for $1,300 a month and it's priced at $137,000. Okay, it's a little bit more expensive than the 1% rule would substantiate. Why is that? Oh, well, this house has new everything. It's a fairly new roof. It's got a new heating and air system. It's got a brand new kitchen. It's totally end-to-end renovation. So, okay, it makes sense. It's rented at $1,300 per month. It's totally new. It's totally deeply renovated, and so it's $137,000. That seems like a fair price for that. So, all right, you, the investor, you're going to buy that. It's a great deal, right? Well, let's dive into that. The fundamental value proposition of this company is that they know what investors look for and they match that with the investor. And that makes sense. Unless, of course, the investor is buying it based on a trust that the rents and the company and the providers are all trustworthy and that they indicate the market value. In the case of this specific house that I'm thinking of here, the market value for the house is about $90,000. But due to some specific factors of the house, the rent value is quite a bit higher. And if you are looking at it through the lens of the 1% rule, then you would justify the higher value based on the rents. But that's not how single-family houses and duplexes and triplexes and quads are traded. They're traded based on the comparable sales approach. And the comparable sales approach says, what would a comparable home sell for? And if a comparable home wouldn't sell for $137,000, then that's not the value of the house, even if you back end to that number through the rents. And that's a fundamental hole. Okay, let's dive a little deeper. Let's say, what does it matter? If it works, if the price of a house works to generate the rental returns that a landlord needs, then what does it even matter? It only matters for this little reason. If you are upside down in a house, what's the one thing you don't have other than equity? Liquidity. You don't have liquidity. And the reason that you would buy a single-family house, in my opinion, the reason you would buy a single-family house instead of a multi-family asset is because of the liquidity. In the same way that cash is a toxic asset. Cash literally loses value every second you hold it. And then if you happen to hold it for the year of 2020, it loses a lot of value in the seconds you held it. And so literally cash becomes less valuable over time, but it's way more liquid than gold. It's way more usable. I can walk down to any corner store, any Walmart, anything, and I can say, here's my cash, and they'll say, here's your goods. I can't necessarily take a plate of nickel or a bar of gold and trade that. And so while gold, silver, and commodities can inflate and they're more, they're safer value stores than cash, you want cash because of its liquidity. In the same way, if you were to buy a single family house based on the merits that single family housing has, which is people buy them constantly, they are the single most demanded asset in the real estate world. I think that's probably true. Maybe parking is more, but by and large, the bell curve of buyer demand is highest. Its peak is a single family house. And so if you buy something that is valued correctly in the single family house world and it performs rental wise, then you've got an investment that works. It's going to pay off that debt over some period of time, or if you own it in cash, then whatever. But the problem is, if you buy it based on a value that's not the market value, that's not based on the comparable sales approach, then you sacrifice the liquidity. The single strongest point about a single family house is just gone. You are functionally possibly upside down in that house. And as it so happens, if your business model is predicated on buying homes off market from sellers who are choosing to do business with you, the question is, why are those sellers choosing to do business with you? Are you able to systematically find so many sellers who don't care or don't know what the market value of their house is that it makes sense for you to be able to buy it, to renovate it, to put a tenant in it, and then to sell it to some out-of-state investor based on the rental value? Or does it make more sense to say that what your business model naturally incentivizes is for you to find places where the rents are higher than the home values so that you can give a seller what they need, which is usually the money out of a property or release from a stressful tenant situation, and you can give them an out for that. You can give them that thing that they're desiring, and you can profit from selling to a buyer based on the rents. But see the hole here? What you're incentivized to do is to sell things at a value that's not the true value, and that doesn't really work out for people in the long run. What you'll find is if you go to sell one of these houses in a year or 2 years or 3, you might well be very upside down in your house. Because a business model that incentivizes sellers with bad tenants or sellers with bad houses that they can't afford to fix up to sell to you so that you can do some stuff to it. And what's your incentive there? To do as little cost of stuff as possible so that you can put a tenant in it that's paying a rate so you can sell it based on the rate they pay. That's not incentivizing the thing that you, as a residential property investor, want the incentives to push to. The same thing happens in a way to all flippers, really all sellers, all listing agents. Like, the motivation is to achieve the highest sale price. But when you are bound and constricted by the comparable sales approach, appraisers, and other real estate professionals, then the market mediates its sale volume and its sale prices in a remarkably efficient way. Even though our market is inefficient and imperfect, it is actually it's more efficient than we like to give it credit for sometimes. But if you take all of those mediating influences out, and you create conflicts of interest that incentivize a company to buy bad, poorly located properties with disproportionately high rents, and then market it as if you're getting this amazing off-market deal, which, by the way, they're also making bukus of fees in order to sell you, then the incentives are really stacked against you. They're stacked against you having the single greatest benefit of owning single-family properties, the liquidity, and the financing. Financing is often much simpler with single-family properties. It's stacked against you having that benefit, because you may well find yourself upside down in your property in years 1 through 5, 10, 20, you're speculating instead of investing, but you're doing it under the guise of investment because these investment people have connected you with this and it's such a good deal and it cash flows. But speculating is when we look at the market and try to jump ahead of what the market's doing. Investing is when you look at the market, you acknowledge what the market's doing, and you come alongside that in a way that the market is willing to reward. But to say, hey, here's what the market's doing, so I bet it'll do it over there, that's speculation. And you probably got into real estate investing because you wanted to invest, not speculate. And so if we accidentally speculate under the guise of investing, it's ultimately far riskier for a lower return. And the third risk is you may end up with some tenants that make you want to set your hair on fire. And unless you bought the property knowing that you might end up with tenants that make you want to set your hair on fire, then that's going to be an unhappy surprise. Because the fact is, if the market value is $90,000 for a property that rents at $1,300, you probably know something of what's going to be true in light of that disproportionate rent. You probably do. If you buy a $40,000 house that rents for $800 a month, you probably know how high maintenance that tenant base is going to be, or how expensive the property management for that is going to be. But if you are told that the value of that house is $80,000 and it conforms to the 1% rule, then you're going to be surprised when you got a tenant that lives in a $40,000 house and is willing to pay 2x the rent. So all this to say, when we really dive into the nitty-gritties, we can find the holes. Mine the hole is about like the when you get onto the metro in the UK and in India, it says mind the gap. Like, we need to mind the holes. It kind of looks like it's pointing at me and saying hole. There are these nuances and these conflicts of interests and these little backwards gaps and holes in business plans and business models that can really actually work against us. But on the face of it, it sounds so amazing. And it's astonishing to me how often I interact with out-of-state investors who are in two camps, with this company in particular. Amazed and awed and enthralled by what they see because their marketing is so good and their branding is so smooth. And it really is amazing. And I'm impressed. And they're all stellar people. They really are. And then the other camp who have tried to sell the properties that they bought in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, or have realized that the tenant base that they got was not what they thought. Like, that's fine. That happens a lot. As a property manager, I know that happens a lot. But to systematically have a result that is because your business model incentivizes it, man, that's just something we've got to be weary of. And so whatever it is, if you're looking at any kind of service provider, any kind of lender, any kind of investment partner, let's dive into the business protocols and the business models we follow, and let's find those holes. Let's find the ways that we're creating inefficiencies that chip away at what we're actually trying to achieve. Because those things, man, they're not just a negative. It's a double negative. It's stopping your progress and it's taking you back. And so as we dive in, we want to be mindful of the holes we create, and we want to shore those up so we can make some great progress. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for diving deep into this one with me. I hope we can do it again sometime soon.